Snowboard Kids!
If I had to pick one game that defined my childhood, without a doubt I would pick Snowboard Kids. I played this game for hours. Every Sunday my dad and I would go to Roger's Video and rent 2 Nintendo 64 games, and 9 times out of 10 I would pick Snowboard Kids. It was actually my graduation gift after I finished high school, although sadly neither cartridge works anymore. Now, I'm not really a racing game guy, so when the idea would come up among friends to play one, most were quick to say, let's play Mario Kart 64. Whenever I brought up Snowboard Kids, I would just hear, well, it's basically the same thing. So today I want to show you why only is it not exactly the same thing, but why I think this franchise has tons of potential were it to come back today.
Welcome!
So what's the story of the game? Well, we have 5 friends who like to snowboard together and also assault and attack and straight up murder each other. Pretty standard stuff for racing games. There's no dialogue in this game spoken by the characters besides and whatever that is. Every character has unique stats based off of speed, turning, and their ability to do tricks. Slash is your most basic character. He has 2 stars in every category, insanely spiky hair, and an insanely large sniffer. And actually that's something that all these characters have. Nancy is the slowest character, but has the best stats in turning and tricks. She wears pink ears and a blue bow, and she has massive feet. I'm sorry, that sounds rude, but those are large feet for a 10-year-old girl. Next up we have Jam. Yes, you heard me right, his name is Jam, and he's got a long breadstick nose with 2 pieces of what I can only assume is tape tied around it, which isn't how noses work, but that's okay. He's the second worst in speed, but the second best in turning and tricks. After that we have Linda, who is the oldest of the bunch as she's 11 instead of 10, and also doesn't wear a shirt. Little odd, little concerning, but moving on. Linda is the second best in speed, but the second worst in turning and tricks, making her the opposite to Jam. And lastly, we have Tommy. Oh, Tommy. I love Tommy. He's a jolly green giant who can't turn or do tricks that well, but you better believe he's gonna go fast. And he's so polite that he bows after pulling off a sick trick. Before you start the level, you get a choice of which board you take, and the boards have similar stats to that of the characters, allowing you to balance out a character if you have a preference over who you play as. This also means that when you're playing multiplayer, it's a bit easier to balance characters out rather than fighting over who gets to play who. The boards also have upgrades as you complete levels and earn money. As I said before, a lot of people compare the gameplay in Snowboard Kids to Mario Kart, but instead of carts, you're on snowboards. But I have to disagree. It's always had a drastically different feel for me, and I've always preferred it over Mario Kart. In order to get items to use, throughout the game there are coins on the track, or you can perform tricks off of ramps. It takes a while to get the timing of the jumps right, and as a kid, most of my friends couldn't do it. If you do the trick late, you'll fall, and it takes a second to recover. If you nail it, you get the sweetest sound in the world.
Nice!
Throughout the track consists of red and blue clown stores, each costing 100 coins. These item banks will give you an item, but if you don't have the cash,
Not enough!
as if it wasn't bad enough that you didn't have enough money, now you have to recover and regain your speed. The game rewards you for paying attention to how much money you have, and it can also be used as a strategy to run someone into it. You can hold up to 2 items at one time, one from a red store and one from a blue. The red store items are projectiles that come in groups of 3, and most of them have a bit of a heat-seeking element to them, but some more so than others. Enough where if you shoot someone a good distance away from you, you'll probably hit them, but if you're too close, you won't. You have the hand, which trips people, pretty standard stuff. The ice block, which freezes your opponent, although you have to be careful because you can run into it and knock yourself down. The parachute, which is arguably the best one as it sends your opponents right into the sky, and depending on where you get hit, it can put you from first to last. The bomb, which is not as heat-seeking as others, explodes into a large radius, and if you're too close, you could take yourself and multiple people with it. And lastly, the snowman, which does not heat-seek as well as the others, but can bounce off of walls for a bit if you miss. The shot will turn you into a giant snowman where you can't turn until it wears off, you hit a wall, or fall off the edge. If you have a projectile coming your way, you can move forward in hopes that it'll run into something, possibly jump over it, or if you're lucky, you'll jump off a ramp and avoid it completely. As for the other items, these can range from ultimate attacks to defensive abilities. The fan, it speeds you up. The ghost, it slows the person first down. The rat, takes everyone's money. The invisibility board, which allows you to avoid projectiles, although will not protect you against running into things. The pan, which flattens everyone in the game. And lastly, a rock. Just a rock. Although I'd like to avoid comparisons, much like Mario Kart, the chances of getting items depend on what place you're in. If you're in first, expect a lot of bombs and rocks. And last, it's mostly pans and parachutes for you.
Ready? Go!
There is no story mode in Snowboard Kids, but the main game type is the battle races. There's a time trial mode and a skill one, but the core of the game lies in these races. Each course has a set of laps you must complete, and in order to complete one lap, you must go from the beginning of the course to the lift at the very end. But be quick, only one person can go on at a time, which means there's going to be tons of pile-ups and pure chaos at the very end. I also find that new players have a very difficult time finding the ramp lift when they first play. They're all marked with arrows, but if you're going fast, I can see why it would be easy to miss them. Upon playing the game for the very first time, there are 6 tracks immediately available to you. Rookie Mountain is the most basic course there is. It's really short, has 5 laps, and only has like 2 jumps in it. It's a really great course to learn the game on, and due to the shortness of it, you will constantly run into people. Big Snowman is the longest track in the game, but there are only 2 laps. This track has a lot of item boxes, so be prepared to hit and be hit. Big Snowman also has tons of long straight points, which can get a little tiresome, but if you're in first place and have people behind you, prepare to panic. Sunset Rock is a beautiful artistic looking level with 3 laps that bring some new things to the table, like these little bunnies wandering around that you have to avoid, large falling rocks, and jumps where if you don't make it, you fall off the course and have to reset, which of course takes some time to do. Night Valley is a really tough track and always has a lot of ways for other players to screw you over, from long thin ledges to jumps that for some reason you always seem to miss. This long thin pathway, which is the absolute worst. 1 or 2 falls on this thing will just make you restart the whole race. This level also features several alternate routes that I guess are technically considered shortcuts that the NPCs will not use, although sometimes it can end up taking longer trying to get into these shortcuts. But they avoid dangerous areas and give you some time away from the NPCs where you don't have to worry about getting shot. Much like the title implies, Grass Valley is in fact not snow, but grass. It's a really unique level and it's a nice and welcome change of scenery. This map features a lot of tall jumps and a few alternate pathways that are actually longer than taking the normal route. This is really the first time that we see the idea of not snowboarding on snow, and it's something that we're going to see more and more of as we keep going. The last of the original 6, we have Dizzyland. Dizzyland has some cool moments like boarding on the water, but also has some extremely frustrating parts like the teacup ride. It's not that hard to avoid one, but if you do get hit, you'll lose some serious time and momentum. It can take a long time to get your footing right after being bounced around by these things. Once you place first in all of these races, you'll earn the Copper Pass, and unlock a brand new track called Quicksand Valley. Much like Grass Valley was on grass, we have not only eliminated snow, but just cold weather altogether. At least Linda's attire is a bit more appropriate now. This level has some cool shortcuts and alternate pathways that can make it difficult to see everyone during the race. It also features this turn that for the life of me, I just can't figure out. The only way that worked for me besides just falling off the ledge and restarting was buying the 3rd level freestyle board, but because you're moving a lot slower than you normally would, you have to play a perfect game in every other regard. This is the map that probably challenged me the most. After that, you unlock the Silver Pass, and with it, Silver Mountain. This map is pretty straightforward, very narrow, there's tons of fog so you can't always see your opponents ahead of you. The music, the appearance, and the way this track is built is very similar to that of the levels in Snowboard Kids 2, and I definitely think this was the inspiration when they built that. Finally, after getting first in all of these races, you unlock Ninja Land. Ninja Land is the shortest course, but there are 9 laps in total. Here, you race Shinoben. Shinoben is a ninja, and he crosses his arms and snowboards on a knife. And his age is question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. So, is he this old man just racing a bunch of 10-year-olds? After beating this, you unlock Shinoben and can actually play as him. Shinoben is the kind of character that you and your friends argue about who gets to play as him, as he's 2.5 stars across the board. He's the most even character, super easy to control, and it's honestly hard to lose a race as him. He also has his own special boards, which can't be upgraded. Once Shinoben is unlocked, you can also buy the Star board from the shop, which is overall the best board in the game. Unless you're compelled to play through the whole game again, there's just not much of a use for this board. You have to come in first in every race to unlock it, so you've already beaten the game to get it. There's no difficulty settings in the game, and thus no harder difficulties to set the game to. At the very end of the game, we get a little cutscene while the credits roll. Tommy's eating, Slash wants the burger, Nancy gets in the way, Tommy cries, chaos ensues. It's really the first time we get to see any personality from these characters. When playing on your own, you can select between a variety of board designs, which is a small detail that I really like, as it lets you give the character you're playing as just a little bit of personality. Otherwise, all the NPCs use the same standard medium board and also use the same paint job depending on the character. Now, as I said, I am not a huge racing game guy. You'll never catch me playing a game where you're literally just racing cars and that's it. I know tons and tons of people love them, but it's just not my thing personally. But a common theme in games, especially racing games, especially older racing games, is a mechanic called rubber banding. The idea is that all the racers are tied together, but instead of being tied with a string, it's with a rubber band. If someone gets too far ahead or too far behind, you'll snap right back to the group. And Snowboard Kids has some heavy rubber banding. Except for on Linda, because she's a damn beast. You can be having the perfect game and still get caught and messed up right near the finish line. Is it ideal? Sometimes no, but I honestly don't mind it. It keeps me feeling like I'm always in the race and that I can't get too comfortable. If this were a game where you were just driving cars and weren't firing bombs at people, then yeah, I would say rubber banding would be a little annoying. The concept itself wasn't meant to be malicious, it was meant to be a consistent challenge from beginning to end. And Snowboard Kids does just that. It gives you some frustrating moments, but without it you'd be missing a ton of amazing moments as well. And while we're here, can we just talk about the music for a second? I love the music in this game. It's exactly what I would want to hear from a game about snowboarding adolescents. Each course has its own unique sound that perfectly matches the setting, and every time I play I can't help but sing along to these tracks that are practically etched into my mind at this point. So Snowboard Kids came out in the Americas in early 1998, and I was only 2 at the time, so by the time I was old enough to actually play the game, I had no idea a sequel had already come out in 1999. I was so excited to play it once I discovered it, but I had no idea what I was in for. Snowboard Kids 2 gives you a feeling that many sequels fail to right off the bat. This is the same game, but you've been given enough new toys to play with that it'll feel completely different. And a majority of the maps don't even have snow in them. The biggest change Snowboard Kids 2 adds is a story. Nothing groundbreaking and still no dialogue outside of and of course, who could forget? But it's still nice to see these characters' personalities shine through a little bit. Slash is a bit of a brat, always at odds with Linda, while he, Jam, and Tommy by association always end up in trouble. Jam is definitely also a troublemaker, as well as being a lover of dance and showing off. He occasionally has a nicer side to him, but more often than not he chooses to goof around with Slash. Nancy is your typical sweet character, loves animals and spending time with her friends despite not being the best snowboarder. Linda is a snobby rich girl who owns her own castle and helicopter. She's also known to lose her temper at the boys quite often and is almost always the one to initiate the race. Tommy is your lovable overweight guy who eats way too much food. He's nice to pretty much everyone and oftentimes gets picked on by Slash and Jam. Then we have Wendy, who wasn't in the first game. Wendy is a child genius who has tons of crazy inventions, and we'll see that come into play later when we break down the maps. There's Damien, who is the main antagonist of the story, who's just a kid who gets picked on endlessly and always tries to ruin the other kids' fun, only to get blown up in some way. Very Team Rocket-like. Coach is a penguin who I guess teaches the kids how to snowboard, I guess? And then there's Mr. Dog. Yeah, the dog who you buy boards from in the first game, he's back. And he's a playable character, but also a dog. And suddenly Snowboard Kid starts to draw parallels with Kingdom Hearts. Another thing about this game is that every character has 4 different outfits, depending on the level you're playing, including a normal attire, a summer attire, a Halloween costume, and a space suit? Yeah, you know the game is going to be good when you see everyone gets their own space suit. Also, Mr. Dog's spacesuit is just a panda, so there's that. Along with the updated characters, there are a few new weapons to the game as well as an update to the old ones. The bomb now has the ability to be fired backwards if you're holding back, and the hand causes the player to lose coins now. The only new shot is a tornado, which bounces off walls, and when you get hit with it, you'll drop an item that you're carrying. For your one-use items, they've added wings to allow you to jump higher and longer, but also slower, a rocket, which in canon Wendy created, which is a lot faster than a fan, although a lot harder to turn, and the triple ghosts, which ghosts all 3 of your opponents at once. You can also have more than one ghost on you now, and if you're in first place, it will happen. There have also been slight additions to the gameplay. You can now hold R down to look behind you, which is incredibly useful if you're shooting bombs or trying to avoid a projectile. One of the coolest and hardest to pull off additions is the ability to deflect incoming shots. If you jump and board grab at the exact right time, you can deflect the shot right back at the person who sent it. The timing is extremely tricky, and even as someone who has been playing this game for almost their entire life, I still can't do it. But I watch the NPCs do it to me all the time. When a race first starts, if you press B at the right time, a rocket will give you an early boost. This is such a classic old school racing game move, and I love it. When you go through an item box and you don't have enough money, you'll just go through it instead of crashing into it. The game's a little bit more forgiving. There's also the ability to do more than one trick off of a jump. Whereas with the first game you could do one full rotation, but now as long as you have the room, you can keep spinning. These make the tricks look insane, and it's so fun when you fly off of a massive steep jump. Something else you couldn't do in the first game is make a trick off a non-jump area. Now you can't just do a trick anywhere, but if your jump is high enough and you're at enough of a decline, you can perform jumps on relatively straight land. Something you couldn't do at all of the original except for a very few specific places. The game is also much more forgiving when hitting a wall or barricade. You're most likely to stumble than just fall over. There are also boss fights or certain levels with tasks that aren't just a standard race, and we'll get into those when we get into the story. After you select your character, you're introduced to Snowtown, the only instance in the franchise where you can walk around freely. You can say hi to your friends, paint your board, go to Wendy's lab to view stats and listen to music, buy new boards. There are 3 minigames that you can play based off of shooting, tricks, and speed, and of course, the battle races, the main aspect of the game. The story doesn't really mean anything in these races, but it's a fun little and very skippable skit that's just fun to watch. Most of the time these skits will revolve around one or two characters, but this doesn't change from what character you actually play as. In fact, sometimes the characters who are involved in the story and initiating the race aren't even going to be in the race. Now let's talk about the maps in Snowboard Kids 2. First off, Sunny Mountain. Damien sees our group of friends having fun and snowboarding around, and in an attempt to bomb them, accidentally blows himself up. Nothing to do with the race. In fact, Damien's not in any of these races until the very end, but it gives you an idea of what exactly to expect from these stories. The map itself is very basic and gives off some serious Rookie Mountain vibes. It's pretty short, only 3 big jumps in it, but it's great to get you used to the game and the new items. It also has these smaller bumps that allow you to do tricks if you're skilled enough. Next up is Turtle Island. Damien attempts to ruin the gang's fun by sending a crab their way, which latches itself onto Slash's hand, who then unknowingly throws it back onto Damien's head. As you can see, it's only the second level before we started to move away from snow-related levels, and this will be the norm. Turtle Island has tons of long stretches which make it great for shooting your opponents. There's a jump where the ground is actually obscured by water, making it impossible to see any rocks placed beneath the surface. The second half of the map takes place underwater with 2 branching pathways for you to take, and the ski lift back up is riding on the back of a turtle. Which, you'll notice the ski lifts are different for every stage. Another nice small touch that just makes the game feel that much different from the first one. For whatever reason, I almost always dominate on this course, and the music just gives it a perfect vibe. Back into the snow, it's Jingle Town. The boys build a tiny snowman, only to discover that the girls have built a much larger snowman, prompting the boys to destroy it, and for Linda to challenge them to a race. This map probably has my favorite song of Snowboard Kids 2 on it. It's a great throwback to the maps like Big Snowman with the ledge and Sunset Rock when avoiding the bunnies, but it still has cool original moments like jumping through the large snowman or boarding on the brick right next to the town buildings. Upon conclusion of this race, Jam, Linda, and Slash, caught up in their competitiveness, have failed to realize that Wendy, Tommy, and Nancy have created their own robotic snowman, which you will then have to defeat before it crosses the line in a race. You'll be given bombs and items on the course to attack it with, all the while it'll be rotating 360 degrees and shooting snowman shots and the occasional ice block shot at you. This can be a pretty good challenge if you're brand new to the game, but it's different than the traditional race, and I really like that they put it in there. The idea of a boss fight in a racing game is so weird to me, but I really feel like they did a great job at pulling it off. Next up is Wendy's house, where Wendy shrinks the entire gang so they can all ride a mini snowboard course that she's created. This is definitely one of the more cool and creative maps in the game, from going on the piano, which plays notes if you jump on it, but not the actual notes, so don't get too excited, and then going through the grandfather clock. It really feels like a course that she set up ahead of time for them to race on. Every now and then I'll notice something new in the background that I haven't before. The bright colors are a really nice and welcome change from the standard white snow. This one is definitely one of the more skilled courses as well, with tons of turns and jumps. After Wendy's house, we visit Linda's castle on her birthday, which naturally the boys ruin by showing up and eating all their food. Now, of course, the layout of the castle is going to make no sense from a practical point of view. The entire layout is on a downward slope, there are sheep running around, and there's also a giant statue of Linda in the middle of nowhere. There's also a huge crowd watching you as you cross the finish line, all rooting for Linda, but honestly, their faces are a bit terrifying. This map has tons of sharp turns and a lot of item boxes, and this one skinny little hallway that I always manage to get blown up in, so just be prepared to be knocked down a ton. Next up is the crazy jungle, where Nancy chases a butterfly, and having let it get away, Linda proposes that they go to her helicopter to chase after it, while Slash and Jam, who were behind, attempt to catch up. The whole map has a heavy prehistoric vibe and has some really unique moments that no other map has, like the large jump off the waterfall, or the weird ancient stone temple face that shoots bombs at you. This map is so easy to fall behind in when playing. One shot can place you from first to last so quickly, and I'm not sure why I noticed that more here than in the other maps. I think it might be because the way the map is set up, you hardly see the other boarders once you get far enough behind. There's a lot of turns and jumps, so you just don't see them after you're in last. There's also this crazy turn right at the start of the game, and I swear only a few characters can actually handle this turn. If you don't nail this turn on the first try, just reset because it's about to get much worse. After winning the race, Nancy will find the butterfly, and with it, a dinosaur. A dinosaur that wants to race. Side note, when the dinosaur starts stomping on the ground and everyone gets knocked off their feet, Tommy just stands there flailing his arms hilariously. I assume it's because he's too fat to be knocked off his feet, but I couldn't help but laugh when I saw this for the first time while recording this. The dinosaur race is awful. If you don't have a practically perfect run, you might as well restart and not waste your time, or the dinosaur will be long gone before you even get a chance to hit it. Like the snowman, there will be items placed on the ground for you to pick up, and you need to make sure you get the right ones at the right time, and you need to hit him every possible chance you'll get, or he'll put more distance between the two of you than me in a consistent uploading schedule. He'll also drop eggs, which are easily avoidable, but if you hit one you will fall over, and should he ever get close enough to you, he can step on you and flatten you. My advice, if you mess up once, quit and restart. Unlike the snowman, you can't just hit him a certain amount of times and win. You have to beat him in the race, and that can prove to be difficult. Next up is Starlight Highway, and at this point, I'm actually kind of missing Snow. Wendy creates a UFO-like machine that transports the gang into space. That's it. This is a snowboarding game. Starlight Highway is filled with tons of rocket pads that give you a rocket boost whenever you board over them. The gravity also seems to be a little bit different here. Not in the sense that you jump slower and higher like you might expect, but occasionally you'll rocket boost into a wall and go flying instead of being knocked off the ground. Because of the rocket boost, it feels a bit uncommon to actually run into another character. There's so much distance between you and the other players, you pretty much need to rely on ghosts and pans to catch up. It's not my favorite map, but I do applaud the creativity, and it really shows that with the later maps, the developers weren't afraid of doing something completely out of the ordinary. It's times like this that I like to look back at the old footage of Rookie Mountain from the first game and wonder how the heck this is the same franchise. The Haunted House. Well, every sitcom needs a Christmas and Halloween episode, so why not Snowboard Kids? Although admittedly it feels like a bit of a step down from being in space. The whole premise is just them going into a haunted house and the door closing behind them. This course is my worst enemy. The course itself isn't all that spooky or anything, but there are corridors filled with ghosts, and if you run into them, you get ghosted. And it also feels like the chances of getting ghosts in boxes is doubled on this map. They're everywhere. And you'd think, as someone whose name is Ghost Boy, I'd be fine with this, but it's so agonizing to watch people just slide right by you while you've got two ghosts on you. There's always this room with a pumpkin that shoots ice blocks, and it's so avoidable, and for whatever reason, I always manage to get hit by it once a race. When I played this to get footage, I must have had 3 or 4 different runs where I was in the lead on the 3rd lap and in the very last room, only to get hit and lose the race. Gimmicks aside, there are a lot of turns and jumps that make the map pretty fun, and there's a lot of chances to really screw over your opponents with a well-timed hit. Last, but certainly not least for the battle maps, we have Iceland, and no, I don't mean the Nordic country. Finally, Damien's anger comes to a head when the center of his affection, Nancy, ignores him, and then he's pushed over by the other members who don't even notice he's there. And we finally get to race Damien, and he's on another level. The map itself is long, with tons of turns, tons of items, and tons of ledges to accidentally fall off of. The aesthetic is really cool, and I honestly really enjoy the return of snow after being away from it for so long. But what really makes the level hard is Damien. He's faster than you, he's probably smarter than you, and he deflects nearly everything you throw at him. Much like the dinosaur race, if you make one mistake, reset, because there's a good chance you will not be catching up. You can't just rely on having a fast character or nailing all the turns, you need to have the skill to work with them. Everything has to go perfect. After winning the final race, you must face the final boss, Damien, in a giant robot. as if that's even fair. Damien's robot will run much faster than you, turn 360 degrees to shoot you with any random projectile, won't stop moving completely when you hit him, and when he does get hit, he drops tons of gears and springs that will almost immediately trip you up. It's not like the race with the dinosaur, it's like the snowman where you have to stop him from getting to the end. After you hit him 10 times, Damien will hop out in a smaller robot and you'll have to hit him 3 more before he reaches the finish line. And let me tell you, there is no worse feeling than letting Damien in a small robot body beat you when you're right at the finish line. After you manage to stop Damien from winning, you're greeted with a lovely little credit sequence, and you've completed the base game. Now I also mentioned the 3 skill mini-games that you can play. I didn't talk about them in the first game because they're honestly not all that exciting. The speed game is playing through the first 3 maps trying to get the fastest lap time. The shot game is playing through the first 3 maps trying to shoot as many snowmen you can with bullets. And the trick game actually puts you into a new map where you just have to do as many tricks as possible, but the map is really short and it doesn't really lend itself to doing that many tricks. With Snowboard Kids 2, I at least appreciate that they tried to change it up a bit from the standard races. The speed game is now its own course, with tons of things to help you boost and slow you down if you're not paying attention. My favorite is the shoot cross, which is on the same map. Your job is newspaper delivery, and you have to put a newspaper in all of the house's mailboxes. You have 30 papers and 20 houses and about 2.5 minutes to do it. However, if you can get 20 boxes in 20 shots, which is harder than it looks, and cross the finish line, you can unlock Mr. Dog to play in multiplayer. The trick game has you playing through a course that is way longer and actually looks like it was meant to do tricks, and completing the course with the required amount of points is how you unlock Coach. Although it's important to mention that Mr. Dog, Coach, and Damien are only available in battle mode, which is just races and not in story mode, as well as these maps that you play these skill games on. Another thing about these 3 modes, and why I mention them now, is that they're actually necessary. You need to have all 3 completed in order to get to the final race. So unlike the first 3 modes that are completely skippable, you actually need to finish these to finish the game. And of course, they also unlock some fun characters to play in free play. After completing the entire story, you'll unlock Expert Mode, where the AI will become much better, like Damien from the last race. They constantly deflect your shots, and if you trip up once, expect to be left behind in the dust. You would think it's more or less the same game, but the AI pulls no punches in Expert Mode. Generally, if you want to hit someone, you have to fire 2 projectiles at once, knowing they'll most likely deflect whatever first one is sent back at you, and you have to hope the second one hits them while also avoid being hit by the one coming back at you. This also, of course, means that the bosses are way harder. Rage-inducing harder. I mentioned how sometimes you need an absolutely perfect run on some of these, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. However, it is a great challenge if you think you've already mastered the game. When you beat maps in Expert Mode, you unlock special boards, similar to and also including the star board from the original game. These boards can help you in beating the other Expert Mode courses, be really fun to mess around with, or fun to use if you're playing multiplayer. The special boards you have include the Poverty Board, a board that just constantly drains your money, the Rich Board, a board that constantly increases your money and can be used to buy other boards, the Charm Board, which makes it so that you can't be affected by ghosts, very useful in the haunted house, the Ninja Board, a board that just makes you turn invisible for the entire race, and if you're fed up with the Damien boss stage, a very handy way to beat it quickly. The High Tech Board, which always has a fan attached, the Dragon Board, which always has rocket and wings attached, and the Ice Board, which is truly an abomination. You can't turn on this thing, you just slide around as if you were actually snowboarding on a block of ice. I hadn't unlocked this as a kid, and doing it for this video, I was in shock how awful this thing is. I also wish I had friends so I could convince them to play this and convince them to use this board. I love the special boards. Whether you're messing around in battle mode or want to change up standard gameplay with friends, it's just another feature that helps Snowboard Kids 2 feel significantly different from its predecessor. You can still very much enjoy the game without them, but it feels like you're actually getting something for beating the game on Expert. Unless you're like me and use the invisible board to cheat on boss levels. In that case, shame on me and shame on you. The rubber banding in this game definitely doesn't feel as intense as the first game. If you play solidly, you can hold a lead and easily not see anyone for the entire race. In that case, I'm a bit grateful for expert mode, because without it, I'd probably be able to easily breeze through the course since I've been playing these maps for as long as I can remember. Snowboard Kids 2 is exactly what a sequel should be in my mind. It took what made the first game fun, made it better, added more, but it also didn't take away from the first game. So many times, sequels will change up the game too much that you can't go back and enjoy the first one anymore, but I've always been able to go back and play the original and enjoy it just as much as this one. I'd say my biggest compliment and complaint is that they went so outside of the box, and maybe it was a little bit too much with the maps. I love the different outfits, the special boards, the crazy maps, but that being said, only having 3 maps with snow in them feels a bit weird. You can technically play the school street and the trick course in battle modes later on outside the story, but if you're just playing through the main story, you'll hardly ever encounter snow. Maybe this is a nitpick, and I really do enjoy the maps, but it's snowboarding. It's okay to have snow in some levels. But then again, maybe as a kid, it was the novelty of not having snow in all the maps that made me really enjoy it. And that's it. There's no more Snowboard Kids. Nope, none at all. There definitely was not a Snowboard Kids DS game.
Snowboard Kids!
Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I had no idea this game even existed until a few years ago, and it's just as disappointing as you would think it is. It doesn't look very good, it doesn't feel very good, it doesn't sound very good. All the courses I could play were generic snow levels that I couldn't tell apart. The entire item system is changed now, where every character has one projectile specific to them, and all the boxes on the course, which no longer require money, are just your blue box items from before, but they're all slightly different and not as good. I'm not going to break it down. Honestly, this game just feels like they were halfway done making a generic snowboarding game and decided to slap the Snowboard Kids brand on it after over half a decade of silence and call it a day. The original games didn't feel like Mario Kart clones to me. This one does. You've got your standard characters, Slash, Jam, Nancy, Brad? Yeah, apparently instead of putting Linda in the game, they put in her brother, Brad. There's a new character named Koyuki. Oh no, Tommy. Tommy, is that you? Oh no. What have they done to my boy? The only resemblance of a storyline we get here is one sentence before you start a circuit with your chosen character. Madly in love with Nancy, Tommy enters the tournament out of desperation to win her attention. Brad enters the tournament to impress Nancy and break through her cold exterior. Nancy wins the race and says, "Of course I won?" So you didn't even bother to play the first 2 games, huh? They literally took the 2 nicest characters and made them jerks. I don't understand. Slash and Jam seem to be filling that role just fine. Why'd they have to go change Nancy and Tommy? And why do they have to make Tommy skinny? And where's Jam's big nose? That nose could literally not be flatter. They just rebooted the game and made virtually every character unlikable. I know it doesn't really matter in the end, it's not like you don't play as a character in Mario Kart because his backstory isn't favorable, but you already had likable personalities here. I understand that you're trying to bring it back into the public, but all you've done is change everything that made the first 2 so lovable and turn it into a generic snowboarding game. Maybe if you played this game before playing the others, you'd like it, but I can't imagine many Snowboard Kids fans were stoked to see their beloved franchise turned into this. Also, can we just talk about the menu sounds? In the original, you had this beautiful crisp sound. In the sequel, we had the most boopingest sound ever. And here it's just... It just goes to show you that you can never underestimate how the little details can give a game its identity. I don't want to talk about this anymore. It's depressing. I don't want to be that classic millennial that says, well, my childhood is ruined now because the smallest thing didn't go the way I like. But I can't help but wonder, if the game was better and more people were exposed to what I was as a kid, if we would see the franchise alive and well. And I guess that's it. I mean, you look on Wikipedia and there's really nothing else to talk about. The franchise died after the DS game and after 15 years has been completely silent. Wait a second. Snowboard Kids Plus? On the PlayStation? I can't even begin to describe what it is I'm feeling right now. It's all so familiar and yet so different. There's a whole animated beginning, a story that I can't understand because it's in Japanese, 3 new characters, you can buy and change the outfits of your characters, you can even dye their hair, which means you can finally make Slash look like an early 2000s boy band member. The character models obviously look a little bit different. Maybe it's because I'm used to the Nintendo graphics, but I think I prefer them more. They just seem a little bit cleaner to me, although I generally find that Nintendo 64 graphics hold up way better than PlayStation 1 or 2. Because the PlayStation controller had 4 digital button directions as opposed to an analog stick, the controls don't feel right at all. With the Nintendo 64, you could slightly pull back on the analog stick to make sharper turns, but because you only have 4 buttons here and there's only 8 different options, it's either turn or turn hard, and it's not the most pleasant thing. There's no gradual movement. If I grew up with it and had more time to get used to it, I'm sure it would be fine, but it's hard to switch from smooth Nintendo 64 to this. Gameplay-wise, almost everything is exactly the same as the first. There are some very minor map changes. The teacups in Dizzyland all move around now, which is awful, and there are minor graphical differences here and there. All the items are the same, but with the bomb you can now shoot backwards like you could in the second, which is really the only difference, which is not bad. When you reach the finish line, your character goes into autopilot mode. You can still send attacks and drop items and jump, but you can't turn your own character anymore. I honestly couldn't tell you why they decided to do this, and I'm glad it wasn't in the original game. Nothing made me laugh more as a kid than getting past the finish line first, getting into the lift, and then watching people crash into it trying to get on. When you complete a course, you no longer get a trophy for everyone, but only for that character. So if you want to 100% this game, you technically have to beat every course with every character, which sounds like a nightmare, and that's coming from someone who has beaten this game multiple times. The music is the same for the most part. It sounds like some of the instruments have been changed, and Rookie Mountain has a new song altogether, but it's missing that electric charm that the N64 had. Although, perhaps it was only like that because of cartridge limitations, and maybe this is how it was always meant to be. There are 3 new characters, Ruby, Pamela, and Nicole. I don't know anything about them because I can't understand the story of the game, but it's just cool to see other characters existing in this universe. And that's really it. For 15 years, the Snowboard Kids franchise has remained cold and frozen, much like the snow the characters board on. Will we ever see a new Snowboard Kids game? Probably not. Atlas is still around, but they've got other things to work on, much larger focuses, and the actual developers of the game, which I can't pronounce, have been working on things like Mario and Sonic at the 2020 Olympics. Snowboard Kids is definitely a cult classic, although fondly remembered by most who played it, and that could be why they're hesitant to bring it back. But it's easy enough to pick up and play that you could technically enjoy a new Snowboard Kids without having played the prior ones, if they were done right. At the very least, I would love to see the old games ported onto the Switch or some other modern console. They're extremely easy to pick up and still play well. I can only hope that other kids can experience what I did as a kid, a racing game that had a sense of intimacy. There wasn't 16 racers, everyone getting hit every 6 seconds. It was just 4 kids racing, 4 friends racing, having a good time, messing around with each other. For whatever reason, it's a franchise that has stuck with me over 20 years later, and while I don't think we'll ever see Slash and the gang again, I'll always remember them fondly. Hey guys, my name is Ghostboy259. Thank you for checking out this video here on Reality Escape. If you're a subscriber, I'm sorry that it took so long. Things have been kind of chaotic lately with this project that I'm working on that's hopefully going to come out this summer. If I ever disappear for like more than a month at a time, feel free to check out my Twitter account. I generally update people as to what's going on there, so that's the best way to kind of keep in contact with me and get updates about the channel. Links are down in the description. I'd like to give a huge shout out to my patrons who are still supporting me despite the fact that I haven't really uploaded anything since starting a patron. Your support means the world to me, and I'm extremely grateful for that. And yeah, we're going to try to get back to uploading once a month here. If I can stick to the schedule that I have set out for myself, we will be uploading one video a month, one bigger video a month. So hopefully you guys stick around. Hopefully I'll see you then. And in the meantime, just have a good weekend, guys. Stay safe out there.